Oh my God, another price bubble, or at least that's the complaint about EU carbon allowances right now. EUAs have risen 30 euros. That's double the price just this year. If you're already invested in carbon credits, perhaps through the KRBN ETF, then you're thinking this is awesome. But is a price bubble forming? If so, what kind of solutions are being proposed? And should you be worried about investing in carbon credits? That's a very important question, particularly if you hold the carbon ETF like me, because 75% of that ETF's holdings are EUA futures. 4 complaints about the rise in EUA prices have made the rounds lately, and they all center around asking regulators to change the system to keep us, investors and speculators, out. This negativity isn't a surprise. If you remember back to my initial KRBN video, I highlighted political risk as the single biggest threat to carbon investment thesis. The risk of localized political change that leads to changes in the ETFs. Political risk is in fact about the only risk to this thesis. So we're witnessing a PR battle with millions of dollars in company profits on the line. Don't be surprised if some of these negative claims about the EUA rise don't hold water. And as an investor, I'm thankful that not all of the experts agree with these loud complaints. The first complaint comes from German utility giant Stromio. They have asked the ESMA to review the impact speculators are having on the EU's emission trading system. This, as EUA futures have doubled in less than a year. The German utility has flagged these futures as needing tighter regulation, that only companies within the EU who are required to comply with carbon mandates should be allowed to participate, because carbon allowances are quote unquote a critical commodity. ESMA has said in response that they will pass on the utility giant's concerns to the European Commission, which oversees these regulations. Complaint number 2 comes from the Greens, Europe's most pro-environment party, which is kind of surprising in my opinion. The Greens want a floor on the price of about 50 euros. That's just about where we sit today. They hope to see allowances triple in price to 150 euros by the end of this decade. Yes, that is a big rise, but they want the increase to be more moderate, as they feel it's risen too fast in 2021 and that could derail the ultimate goal of lower emissions and carbon neutrality. Remember, the scientific consensus is that prices need to reach 100 euros per ton to achieve carbon neutrality on the continent. The third recent complaint comes from Poland, who, like the Greens and like Stromio, is also upset that allowance prices are rising so fast. The Eastern European nation says the volatility is making it difficult for developing nations like them to properly budget for costs, both in allowances and retrofitting toward greener infrastructure. This is a very similar case to what Stromio is trying to make. And a fourth complaint to the list, Denmark's climate minister Dan Jorgensen is calling for EUA reform. While he's a fan of high prices for carbon, he's worried about volatility driving businesses to regions with more lax regulations, a problem known as carbon leakage. Businesses can escape emissions laws by moving to a different region. Jorgensen says the role of speculators should be examined and potentially reined in. And another complaint that surfaced from our viewers was that hardly anyone knows about carbon credit investing, and it was determined the best way to alert more people is to hit that like button. Okay, so all of these regulatory complaints are scary stuff, right? No, for the record, ESMA says that futures contracts are outside of their scope to regulate. So that's good for investors. And a study from earlier this year pointed out that changing the regs so that only businesses can hold allowances would have zero impact on futures trading and would do nothing to quell the problem of outside speculators. The same study also notes that new regulations aren't bullseyes and probably aren't the answer. Things like price ceilings are difficult to agree on and end up turning a market system into a tax system. In fact, the last time a regulation was changed in the ETS took 5 years to work out and implement. And in other words, there is no overnight fix to these complaints and no immediate threat to the carbon investment thesis. Even with all of this negative noise, whether prices are rising too fast or not, new data says that today's price still isn't enough to change how much fossil fuel is burned for heat generation. Allowance prices need to go even higher to force that change. Remember, that's why this cap and trade legislation was enacted in the first place, to reduce emissions, not to make things easy and cushy for coal-burning power plants. Take a look at what natural gas prices are doing right now. As winter draws closer, these utility companies are jockeying for carbon allowances to match their increased emissions. More gas burning means more allowances for energy companies. This directly contradicts what analysts were saying in February, that speculators like us were the only reason EUAs were rising and that a correction was on the horizon. I don't expect to see any changes to the European ETFs that are significant enough to damage the overall carbon investment thesis. Citizens aren't going to be happy if governments start caving to gas companies and utility giants, and it's bad politics to side with coal-burning plants over protecting our imperiled planet. Beyond that, futures contracts aren't as easily regulated compared to physical allowances, and we're still not at the price threshold needed to see real change in the climate crisis. I expect EUA prices to continue to rise to 100 euros a ton and more, just as I expect negative noise from utility giants to continue hitting the press. So I think we need to hold the course on our carbon credit investments and continue to ride this upward wave until we get real change in the markets. Let me know your thoughts on the investment thesis down below. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.